Okay, let's rank the most to least optimistic signs. So most optimistic versus most cynical, most positive versus most negative, etc. I haven't done a ranking video in a while, so I figured it was time. If you haven't seen my other ranking videos, or if you were interested, I will link those above. Otherwise, let's go through we'll go through in traditional order, Aries to Pisces. And yeah, okay, starting out with Aries. Aries is going to be one of the most optimistic signs. I actually don't think Aries is the most optimistic. I think there's one other sign that is even more optimistic than Aries. Only one. You could maybe argue two might be more optimistic, but but yeah, Aries is very positive, very confident, generally speaking. They're very assertive. They're out of all the signs, Aries is the one that's the leader. They initiate. They're the instigator more so than any other sign. So definitely need some optimism to have that kind of oomph for sure. Okay, let's do Taurus next, and I'm actually gonna have some of my Coca-Cola. Okay, Taurus is more middle of the road. Taurus is an earth sign. The earth signs are very grounded, very practical, but Taurus is ruled by a benefic. Generally speaking, the signs that are ruled by benefics, so the signs that are ruled by Jupiter, Venus, and the Sun, those are going to be more positive, more optimistic, more hedonistic as well, for that matter. Yeah, Mars is kind of an interesting one because Mars is technically a malefic, but Aries is ruled by Mars, and Aries is very optimistic. But I digress. Taurus is, kind of middle of the road, but also slightly positive. I really think they're very grounded, but also like to have a good time. You know what I mean? So I respect that. I admire Taurus for that. I'm going to put them in the positive tier. Man, I haven't done one of these in a while. I'm a little rusty, if I'm being totally honest. Gemini. I think Gemini truly is middle of the road. Since we're talking about malefics and benefics, Gemini's not ruled by either. Gemini's ruled by Mercury, which is kind of just neutral. There are some neutral planets like Mercury and the Moon, for example. And so as such, Gemini can be very optimistic, very happy-go-lucky, very cheerful, especially if you mix in some fire. Like for instance, if a Gemini sun is around fiery people with fire in their astrology, or let's say someone has Gemini sun or Gemini moon, but they have other like major fire placements, they're going to be very happy-go-lucky, very outgoing. Oh dang, I was just thinking of a celebrity, but I forgot her name. Leo sun, Gemini moon, a combination like that's gonna be very happy-go-lucky, very cheerful. But Gemini can also be actually very blunt. I don't know if everyone realizes that. Gemini can be very dry, detached, even cynical to some extent. So yeah, Gemini, as usual with Gemini, they can kind of go any direction. They're very much on both sides of the equation. Next is Cancer, which is interestingly also ruled by a neutral planets, a neutral ruler. Moon as well as Cancer have to do with emotion. So is emotion good or bad? Well, I think it's very clear. Obviously it's both, right? Emotion can be very enjoyable, very pleasant. It can also be exactly the opposite. It can be very unpleasant. It really falls on either extreme of both sides and everywhere in between. Emotion itself can also be very functional and help us in very clear ways, and it can also sometimes feel like it's at our detriment. It can be difficult to deal with. So and when it comes to Cancer is interesting because Cancer is a cardinal sign. It's the first sign following the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. So there's this weird mix with Cancer of the beginning of summer. That's generally a really fun time, right? Summer, it's a really warm season. There's so much vibrant energy, especially right after the summer solstice. So much energy, so much fun. Generally speaking, spring and summer are easier because more of the inner solar system bodies are in domicile or exaltation during spring and summer as opposed to fall and winter. Cancer is a very warm time, so vibrant, so nurturing. But on the other hand, because Cancer is the first sign after the summer solstice, that means Cancer is the first sign where the daylight is decreasing. Ever since Aries, or really ever since Capricorn, the daylight was building and building and building. After the spring equinox with Aries, that's where there's more daylight than nighttime. So the sun really starts to dominate in those spring signs of Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. And then Cancer, there's still plenty of light. That's one of the brightest times of the year. But again, because the sunlight is slowly starting to dwindle, starting in Cancer, Cancer is kind of like the beginning of the end. Cancer has this deep understanding that, we can all party and have a great time, but this will all end at some point. Fall is coming, winter is coming. There are harder, darker times coming. So all that being said, Cancer can come across very warm and gentle and very optimistic, but they do have this deep sense of kind of sadness to them, or this deep they can be cynical sometimes as well. So it's a really long way of saying I think Cancer is actually average if you put it all together, maybe slightly on the more negative side. I'm just a realist in this area because I don't know, I feel like that's what cynical people say. I don't know where I fall in this. I guess you can look at my signs once I'm done. Leo. Yeah, I guess we are on Leo already. Okay. Yeah, Leo. Leo's ruled by the sun, which is a benefic. Yeah, and I know Leo follows Cancer, so you would think, well, the days are getting darker, right? But many areas in the northern hemisphere actually have their hottest, warmest time of the year in August, more so in Leo season rather than Cancer. Some do have their hottest time in Cancer, some have it even as late as Virgo. It obviously varies, and of course the southern hemisphere is completely different. But I do think Leo's kind of the middle of summer. It's that fixed fire, being fixed fire. I think they more than any other sign really just trust that the good times will continue, which again, I know that's a little bit contradictory coming off of Cancer, but another way you could look at it too is that I've been thinking about this lately, how each sign does kind of bleed into the next one. Of course, each sign is very distinct from the ones around it. It'll go yin, yang, fire, earth, air, water, yang, yin, yin, I guess technically. So it's kind of like a breath in, breath out, breath in, breath out. But it is interesting to compare signs that are side by side. So for instance, like a water sign like Cancer really kind of pulls back, and it just experiences so much. And I think it does so much soul work. And then that kind of leads to the confidence and the optimism that the following fire sign has, if that makes sense. So that's another way to look at it. Cancer feels so much and processes so much, and then that kind of leads to Leo's confidence and outgoingness. That's one way of looking at it. But yeah, Leo is very optimistic, maybe even to a fault. It's actually difficult to say which is more optimistic, Aries or Leo. I think if you're talking about a more short-term context, then Aries would be more optimistic. They have that like punch of energy to really get things going. But if you're talking about like on a day-to-day, like more of a long-term way, Leo is fixed fire, so they have that kind of endurance to their warmth, their enthusiasm, etc. Okay, yeah, we really haven't covered any cynical signs yet at all. Generally speaking, here's another pattern too, which we're already seeing this now, but the signs in the beginning are going to be more optimistic than the signs toward the end, generally speaking. Obviously, we've been kind of all over the place, but most of the cynical signs, or this is a different way to put it, most of the most difficult signs to experience are going to be toward the end. And I don't know, we can speculate as to why that is, but I don't want this video to be too long. Okay, so Virgo's very cynical. I'm going to put them at the most cynical tier for now. I may adjust that later. I'm not really sure. I'm so freaking indecisive. Very indecisive. Like Cancer could be here, honestly, but we'll leave them there for now. Which is more optimistic, Gemini or Cancer? I would say Gemini, because Gemini is more curious. They do have some yang energy to get things going. Cancer is more kind of heavy. There's so much emotion there. So I don't know. I may move these around. It is interesting, though. Now that would establish a pattern: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and then we go back up to Leo, but then suddenly way back down to Virgo. Okay. Virgo, Earth sign, practical. Generally speaking, the Earth signs are going to be a little bit more cynical, Taurus is one exception because Taurus is ruled by Venus, but the other earth signs are a little bit more cynical or glass half empty. I want to say too that I don't view the signs that are more negative, I don't view that as a flaw. Of course, I do strive to be optimistic, and actually that's one thing that I think I struggle with. Um, but but I do think that the signs that are more cynical are also more hardworking. If you're really optimistic and you think everything's going to be fine, there's no need to do any work, right? There's no need to make any kind of changes. So I think the signs that are most optimistic also tend to be the most complacent. Sometimes but you could argue the other way around though. You have to be a little optimistic to do anything, right? You have to be optimistic that whatever you're launching is going to actually work, especially for like a big project. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there is value in either side here. There's a reason why these signs are the way they are. This isn't like a good versus bad thing. Anyway, Virgo is cynical. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, so it's very neutral, very objective. I know individuals who have major Virgo placements definitely view themselves as objective, even though they're kind of not. Everyone is subjective, but whatever. Analyzing subjective versus objective is a total rabbit hole, which I refuse to get into. Virgo is more negative. They're constantly looking for something to fix. I think part of this is that they're an overthinking sign. Gemini is too, but Gemini is air, so they don't take things quite as seriously. Virgo is just as overthinking as Gemini is, but it's earth, so it analyzes everything in a really heavy manner. It really feels everything very deeply. So yeah, Virgo does, I think, often get preoccupied with like nitpicking and critiquing. It's not a very creative sign because Virgo is the end of summer. Virgo technically is still in summer. It's the last sign of summer. So there's so much energy. There's so much vibrant energy at that time. So really what Virgo's job is taking all that energy and thinking about how do we manage this? Okay, how do we organize this? How do we prepare the energy for fall, for winter? Because Virgo, just like Cancer, Virgo is very aware, like the summer is ending. Virgo is making way. Virgo actually has a really heavy job being the sixth sign. It's the last sign of the first hemisphere of the zodiac. Okay. So Virgo's job is to prepare not only the end of summer, but also the end of the entire first half of the zodiac and prepare for not just fall, but the entire last half of the zodiac as well. So there's a lot of integration. There's a lot of, taking everything in, processing everything. Virgo still does want to have a good time. Virgo's aware of the abundance of energy that there is. Virgo's the last sign where there's more daylight than nighttime. So I think Virgo does want to have a good time and enjoy that vibrant energy. But Virgo also is kind of obsessed with like making the most of it. How do we ration this? How do we ration the good times? How do we ration the energy, etc. So, anyways, that's a more nuanced take on why would Virgo be cynical. Virgo's cynical because they have to be for their zodiacal duties. Let's put it that way. Libra. Okay, now I feel like we're kind of going all over the place. We were just heading straight down a line, but now we're really kind of going all over the place as we're entering the last half of the zodiac. Libra is, I think, tricky. I'm stumped by Libra. Maybe it's just because I'm a Virgo and Libra is kind of the next sign, but I think Libra is more complex than people give it credit for. Libra is an air sign, so of course it is detached. I would actually argue that Libra is the most detached sign, which I know they don't always seem like it because they're so empathetic, right? But I would argue that you actually have to maintain a certain level of detachment in order to have empathy. You have to be detached from your own circumstances in order to, prioritize someone else's well-being, I guess. That's at least what we see with the air signs. Maybe it's a little bit different for water signs since they're also empathetic, but whatever. But Libra's very detached, but that's what allows them to be so present with other people's thoughts and feelings. Anyway, so very detached, but Libra is ruled by Venus though. So Libra does want to have a great time. in the first sign of fall, there's a lot of like, I think it's a very romantic time, right? Because Libra's ruled by Venus. The two signs that are ruled by Venus generally have to do with the most beautiful times of the year. So those would be Taurus, which is the middle of spring, very beautiful, and then Libra, which is the beginning of fall. Both of those are very colorful times. Of course, generally speaking, obviously, climate and different regions are going to be different, but but yeah, the beginning of fall, it's a very fashionable time, very studious and intellectual, but also very social. It tends to be kind of like fashion season, and Libra has to do with getting to know other people, learning from other people, maybe in an academic sense, but also socially, intellectually, romantically, very flirty sign. Okay, I'm just really going all over the board. Libra is, I would say, positive. I would say they're kind of on par with Taurus. Both are very practical signs. Taurus and Libra can be extremely practical. Like, they can actually have a very detached kind of, very realistic side to them. But I think generally speaking, they do prefer to view the glass half full. They both have a slightly hedonistic side to them. They want to have a good time. They're focused on pleasure and good things, being ruled by Venus. So next is Scorpio. Scorpio is one of the most cynical signs. It is interesting, though. I think everything Scorpio does, they do to an extreme. It's 100% or it's 0%. So I have witnessed, like, some of the most optimistic people I've ever met had major Scorpio placements. So of course, just like with any ranking, Scorpio, you could argue they could be on either side of each extreme. But generally speaking, I do think Scorpio is a more cynical sign. Scorpio is the middle of fall, so it's the time where the days are getting darker the fastest. I actually don't know if that's true. Am I making that up? You can fact check me if you'd like. I'd actually love a fact checker. That would be such a privilege. But anyway, Scorpio is the middle of fall, so things are rapidly becoming darker. Everything is kind of like dying in the natural world, or at least it appears to be dying. And where I'm from, we often have our first frost in Scorpio season. Actually, pretty much always, it's somewhere in Scorpio season. So things become cold, harsh, rugged. So Scorpio has to be resilient. And again, it's kind of reminiscent to Virgo. Virgo's wrapping up summer, preparing for what's to come. Scorpio is very much saying, okay, like, it's now or never. Like the apocalypse is here, so to speak. I mean, that's kind of a dramatization. But Scorpio's saying, okay, this is fall. Like, Cancer and Virgo, when they were thinking that fall was coming, like, they weren't crazy because it's here now. Like, we gotta wrap things up. We gotta prepare things. It's getting colder. It's getting harsher. So that is, I guess, cynical. I think there's a lot of paranoia with Scorpio, but also kind of hyper awareness. Virgo and Scorpio have that in common. They're hyper aware. They're taking in so much data, so much information, so they can use that to their advantage. But it comes from a place of, I don't think anyone's hyper aware just because it's fun, it's a survival mechanism. They're doing it because they have to. It's not this like fun time of like spring or maybe even summer. This comes from the temperatures going down, things becoming harder. Next is Sagittarius. I would say Sagittarius is the most optimistic sign. And I've actually thought about that a lot recently. We just had Sagittarius season a couple months ago, and I thought about it a lot, and I actually have a different understanding. I don't know what spurred this new understanding, but I really view these signs around the winter solstice differently than I ever did before. Okay, so why is Sagittarius the most optimistic sign? That doesn't make sense, right? Because Sagittarius is the sign approaching the winter solstice. It is, along with Capricorn, Sagittarius is the darkest time of the year. So you would think that would be really dark, right? I mean, Sagittarius is surrounded by Scorpio and Capricorn, which we're about to talk about. But, Scorpio and Capricorn, I would regard as the most cynical signs. So how can you have the most optimistic signs surrounded by the most cynical signs? And to that, I would say, in many ways, I think Sagittarius represents the end. It's kind of like the apocalypse. Like, there's this kind of death that comes with Scorpio. Many people die in Scorpio, quite literally. Like most of the people I know who have died in November, during Scorpio season. So there is literally like this kind of death. Like there's this ending. Even for those of us who survive Scorpio season, I do think, I don't know, especially for those of us that are connected to nature, like we can see how there's a huge ending there. So Sagittarius almost represents kind of like the apocalypse in a way, like of course that's traumatic, that's very negative and dark, but at the same time, there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with, this is the end, nothing matters. We don't have to work hard during this season because there's no work left to be done. The growing season is over, right? We've grown everything. We've planted the seeds in winter, which we're about to talk about. Spring, we've like continued cultivating this. Obviously, I don't come from an agricultural background, and most of us don't now, but we're still tied to these cycles. During fall, that's the harvest season. So Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, we're harvesting everything. There starts to become these huge feasts, which we still have holidays based on in fall. But Scorpio specifically is more about like canning and pickling everything. Let's, kind of Virgo to some extent too. Like let's organize everything. Let's prepare everything. Historically you would salt your meats, or if you can like freeze things, you're focused on preserving things to last through the winter. Sagittarius season comes and it's basically like, okay, we've already like saved everything that we can save. Usually there's some kind of excess that comes at Sagittarius season where, we can't exactly preserve all this, but it's also not going to last through the winter, if that makes sense. So you basically just have these outrageous feasts during Sagittarius season. So for instance, in America, Thanksgiving falls in Sagittarius, and also the entire build-up before Christmas is in Sagittarius season as well. Technically, Christmas does fall in Capricorn season, but again, Christmas to me isn't just one day. It's like it's a whole build-up. It's a whole excitement for a lot of people. So so anyway, there's this huge amount of like feasts, and it's kind of just like everything's kind of over at this point, so nothing matters, go crazy, right? So that's why I think to a fault, Sagittarius is the most optimistic sign. Sagittarius is the sign that says like, let's just do it. Like, who cares? Nothing matters anymore. They're even more optimistic than Aries or Leo. Aries or Leo have to deal with their consequences. They still have like the rest of the year to deal with, if that makes sense. What we're going to explore in the last three signs is that following Sagittarius, there's kind of a huge lull. There's almost like a vacancy. There's like an emptiness that comes to the winter signs. So Sagittarius is done. Like Sagittarius has no consequences. Like go crazy, do whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm not literally saying if you have Sagittarius placements, you don't have consequences. You probably do, and you're probably very aware of that, because of this whole energy of I can do what I want. Nothing matters. I think on the one hand, I very much admire that, and I love being around Sagittariuses. It's so much fun. But on the other hand, I'm very wary of that as well. We do have consequences. You can't just go crazy, So anyway, that's my spiel about Sagittarius. Okay, and then like I alluded to, going from Sagittarius to Capricorn, I would argue that the most difficult signs in the zodiac are Scorpio and Capricorn. With Capricorn, and I've thought about this a lot lately as well. I promise my spiel won't be as long for this one, but Capricorn's the first sign following the winter solstice. So in a way, it's actually a lot like Cancer, but kind of flipped, right? Capricorn's exactly opposite Cancer. Cancer follows the summer solstice. Capricorn follows the winter solstice. So, just like how Cancer was very kind of bittersweet, I think Capricorn is as well, but for the opposite reasons. Capricorn is the first sign where the days are starting to get longer. So following this, everything ended in Scorpio and Sagittarius and nothing matters anymore. Then now starts this very different energy of Capricorn, because the days are getting longer in Capricorn knows that the growing season will come. Like things will become vibrant in the future. That's why Capricorn's so focused on preparing. Um, we have to work hard now. We have to start like maybe rationing, but also like planting the seeds for the future, basically. So some of your first seeds are going to be started to be literally planted during Capricorn season. Also, Capricorn's kind of it's the start of the whole growth cycle, basically. I actually believe, like, in many ways, the entire zodiac really does start with Capricorn. And actually, maybe it does make sense that we start our calendar year in the West during Capricorn season, because it's kind of like, we start the new moon during the darkest time of the lunar cycle. Why not start the zodiac, the solar cycle, during the darkest time as well? That's what I think. So Capricorn's really it's constantly thinking about the future, because everything is about the future. The daylight is gradually increasing. There's this buildup coming, right? So in many ways, it's actually the exact opposite of Sagittarius. Sagittarius was saying, like, the days are getting shorter, the end is nigh, nothing matters, who cares? Capricorn is the exact opposite. Like, we're coming out of that darkest time, and the light is returning. So let's start preparing. Let's plan out our year, for instance. Like, I think New Year's resolutions are kind of a poor example of that. But in many ways, like, I don't know, for those of us that are in business, for example, we may want to plan out our year, or maybe, I don't know, in other jobs, other positions that either have to do with natural cycles and seasons, or business cycles. Anything having to do with planning out the year, you do that during Capricorn season, right? So anyway, that's my take on Capricorn. I think, but it makes so much sense. Like, I've really experienced this recently. Whatever sign Mercury transits through, I literally experience that sign, because I'm so ruled by Mercury. So right now Mercury's in Capricorn, just like it has been for the last couple of weeks, and so I'm very content just investing in the future. I've done a lot of work which I haven't immediately been like compensated for, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining, because I'm not. I'm more than happy to do that. I think that's Capricorn's mentality all the time. If you have those natal Capricorn placements, you're just constantly investing in the future, because that's what that energy represents. Okay. Next is Aquarius. Clearly I have a lot of opinions about all this, but next is Aquarius. And with this new mentality that I have with Sagittarius and Capricorn, this also makes sense why Aquarius in many ways is very similar to Capricorn. Aquarius is more similar to Capricorn than any other two consecutive signs are, in my opinion. They're the only two signs that are side by side which are ruled by the same planet. So just like how Capricorn, it's the first sign. Capricorn's the first sign where the daylight is returning. Aquarius is the second sign where the daylight is returning. So again, you have this time where things are pretty dark, like very literally. There's more darkness than light, but the light is increasing. So just like Capricorn, Aquarius is very much focused on the future. It's focused on goals and dreams, and planning things out. Where is this going? Where is this going in the future? I'm getting completely sidetracked. I'm so sorry. Okay, we're talking about the most optimistic sign. So Aquarius is basically very similar to Capricorn, but the main difference is that Aquarius is a yang sign. It's an air sign. Air signs / like yang signs in general are generally more optimistic than yin signs. Yang signs are more expansive. They're more focused on like spontaneity, like shoot first, ask questions later. Yin signs are more focused on planning. Hopefully I've illustrated that in my deep dive of these signs. So anyway, Aquarius is very similar to Capricorn, but a little bit more optimistic. I would say just a hair more. I would still argue Aquarius can be very cynical. Aquarius can be very blunt. They are definitely very realistic, I guess you could say. Very dry. Aquarius is not sugarcoating anything. I would say they're among the most kind of blunt and even the most cynical, but they are a little bit more positive than Capricorn. A little bit more spontaneous, more adventurous, a little bit more enthusiastic, depending on the placements and the person. Yeah, I would say Gemini is more optimistic than Cancer. Cancer is more optimistic than Aquarius, but they're all pretty similar. Last is Pisces. So Pisces is the most optimistic water sign because, now once we get to Pisces, Pisces is leading to the spring equinox. It's not quite there yet, but the spring equinox follows Pisces. It begins Aries. So Pisces is, in some ways, kind of similar to Virgo because, just like Virgo was integrating the entire first hemisphere and preparing for the last hemisphere, Pisces is integrating the last hemisphere, preparing for the first hemisphere. Pisces is even more profound because it's integrating one entire zodiacal cycle and preparing for the next. So yeah. And what does that have to do with how optimistic they are? I keep sidetracking. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. That's the main difference. So kind of like what we talked about with the earth signs, only one is ruled by a benefic, and that's Taurus. So earth signs are generally more cynical or practical, with the exception of Taurus being more on the positive side. Water signs are that way as well. Water signs, the only water sign ruled by a benefic is Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is the most optimistic energy. So I would say Pisces is almost at the top, but not quite. I think Pisces is more optimistic than Libra or Taurus. Because with Pisces, it's like all things are true. They feel so much. They feel in so many different directions. They feel like, I don't know, anything's possible, I guess. Like whatever I think they like to have fun first and then deal with the work later, right? They like to just, I'm feeling this now, so I'm going to go with it and explore that truth. Who cares if it's like only one side of the equation? Like that's my Virgo side talking. But yeah, there's this kind of sheer optimism with Pisces. I think in many ways it's reminiscent of Sagittarius. Being ruled by Jupiter, both are focused on expansion, and the most expansion oriented signs are going to be the most positive for sure. Anyway, okay, so that's my take on the most versus least optimistic signs. I hope you enjoyed that. Definitely, if you want a reading, hit me up for that. My website is manic.mercurian.net. My information is always in the description. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Have a great day.